Tonight on the Venomous Fringe.
We grew up around them. A paranormal aspect to it also. I think they go hand in hand. It continued to harass, and I kind of took that personal because I knew that it scared her. 15, 16 is when we really started pushing, trying to catch it. Turn and I look, and these coyotes are now bipedal.
Our world is filled with darkness that nobody can explain. In what we face, we also encounter the work of evil. Join us tonight as we dive into subject matter of something wicked and macabre that inflicts our modern world. You're listening to the Venomous Fringe.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Venomous Fringe. I'm your host, Christopher Cyrus, and this evening I have the amazing pleasure of sitting down with Stephen Michael from Abnormal Investigations. Stephen is a cryptozoologist and paranormal investigator, and also YouTuber, and a successful show, and I'm happy to have him on tonight. And Stephen, welcome to the Venomous Fringe. Before we get started, can you please give us a little background on who you are and how everything began for you in this field and beyond?
Oh man, pretty much just a normal, ordinary country boy. Grew up living around the cryptids. My mom and her sisters and brothers, they grew up with my grannies, and they had always had these things around the house. And as I grew up, of course, we would go to her house, and we grew up around them. And I had the investigative nature. I'd worked in security, worked with law enforcement, and then got into I was an investigator for about 12 years. And everything just kind of linked together.
Have you ever yourself had an experience with a cryptid or paranormal experience?
Yeah, several. Growing up in my younger years, staying with my granny, she would have encounters every night. It got pretty wild at her house. It wasn't just wild when I was younger, but it was wild when my mom, her brothers and sisters were younger. For some reason, that place seemed to be something that attracted, and I won't say just cryptid. I would say that there was a paranormal aspect to it also. I think they go hand in hand, but there was both of those things there. And growing up in it, I can't say that I, walk right up on one and seen one, in the broad daylight and seen one. But as far as, shadows or being close to it or seeing movement or something like that, silhouettes, yeah, I've been.
Was there a specific experience that made you think otherwise, that I was like, I want to get more answers on, and which that I wanted to study on?
I think it was in general, but also when my granny had become ill, she had a stroke. And the girls would take turns taking care of her, staying 2 and 3 days a night with her. And even with her being ill, it continued to harass. And I kind of took that personal because I knew that it scared her. She had a stroke. She couldn't walk. And it really started to frustrate me at about that age. And that's whenever I said, okay, it's time to find out what this is and try to stop it.
When was the first time you investigated, and did you find anything?
Probably the first time I actually went out as far as like investigating as far as a YouTube channel would have been 2021. Going back to my younger years when we were just trying to stop it, get rid of it, not really trying to figure out what it was. We was pretty sure we knew what it was from just, Granny would tell us, my aunts and uncles. We knew that, they would say that it was Bigfoot, and then they would also say that there was other things out there. So I would say probably 15, 16 is when we really started pushing, trying to catch it, trying to sneak up on it, trying to set traps, trying to, everything my uncles had tried, that didn't work, but we thought we were better, we was going to achieve it, but never did.
So considering that you're located in Oklahoma, have you ever heard of the Oklahomian howler, which is a cryptid between Bigfoot, Dogman, many believe to be Bigfoot, reported in the southern part of Oklahoma?
I don't know much about that one. No, I haven't heard of that one.
Have you ever had an experience or some kind of encounter with a Bigfoot, dogman, or any cryptid or any kind of paranormal that stood out to you, one of which that you remember consistently and has never left your mind?
Probably one of the more memorable encounters would have been, we had a drought a few years back, and the lake was really far down. I had took my youngest son and my nephew down to the lake, and we were walking, and they were treasure hunting, and we was quite a ways from the truck, but like I said, the water was way down. We was walking almost like a desert lake, And while we're walking, the sun's starting to set, and my little nephew, he's like, Mike, look. And over at the tree line, there's like a pack of coyotes. And that's what I, attributed to. I was like, oh, they won't hurt you. They're more afraid of us than we are them. Well, while we're walking, they about pull my arm off. They're like, Mike. My little boy's like, Dad. And I turn and I look, and these coyotes are now bipedal. And one of them had climbed up. We have a lot of locust trees down by the lake. It had climbed up the locust tree and was shaking the tree. And of course, the kids are, they're panicking. They're really scared. The only thing I had on me at the time was my sidearm, so I knew I was limited in the range I would be able to, protect us. So I told them, I said, let's just start heading toward the truck. So we start going across the dry bed of the lake. We're headed toward the truck. The call them creatures, they stayed along the wood line. They didn't come out into the dried lake. They paralleled us. While we were going toward the truck, they were following the wooded line. And not really, they wasn't running. I didn't feel like they were going to come at us, but they were definitely interested in what we were doing. And there was one, I remember the one, he stuck out the most. He was taller, seemed to be maybe the leader, I'm not sure, but he was the one that would, as they were moving, would jump up into the trees and would shake the trees violently and then jump down. But he was the only one that would do that. And then eventually we made it back to the vehicle. They never came across toward us, toward the truck or anything, and then we was able to drive out. But, you still wonder what if we would have stayed later or, had been deeper and the sun would have went down. That always was in the back of my mind.
Did you ever return to the region and do some recon, or did you just change your mind after and not go back?
Actually, I did return. It's one of the places I visit frequently that I do a lot of investigations at. I've had a few encounters down there since that. I have a video. I'm not real sure what it was. I was using an IR camera, and I heard something running down the side of the lake. I filmed it. I got a little bit of it on film. It almost looks like a oversized alligator running down the side of the lake. It's really weird looking. I'll send you a copy of it. And another weird thing is I was on a live, and I was doing a live down there, and I was walking up this. There's an old road down there. This used to be an old city that's now underwater. So we have the old roadways that were there before they flooded it that still have the old gravel. So you got some pretty good trails. I'm coming up this roadway, and below it is kind of like a not really a ditch, but it slopes downward into like a field. And I'm walking up on the higher part, and then of course there's the taller grass on the sides. I've heard something was following me while I was making my way back, and I even made the comment to the audience. I was like, "There's something following me." I could hear it, and as I was making my way up, I started kind of messing around with it. I was like, "I can see you. You're not hiding that good," kind of just letting it know I knew it was there. There's a part to where you come up and you go from the road, and it kind of jags off to the left, and you have to kind of go through the trees to make your way up onto the main road to get to your vehicle. Well, when I was coming through there, I'd made the comment to it that I was going to switch it because it had started throwing stuff at me, like little twigs, nothing big, nothing, Whenever I went to walk through the two big trees where you take the little jaunt to the left. I was hit in the face. It hit me with a limb. It hit me across the face. It cut my arm. Almost immediately blacked my eye on camera. It knocked the light off my head, knocked the camera out of my hand, and I heard it run away. That was one of the times I really felt like it was going to get bad, that it had went physical. Luckily it did run off and it didn't do anything further, but that location has proven to be pretty active. I've got a lot of good screams down there, wood knocks and stuff like that, but that was one of the worst encounters.
In your opinion, what do you believe these cryptids and creatures to be? Do you think that they are paranormal, supernatural, flesh and blood? What do you think?
Like you said, it's an opinion. Everybody's still trying to guess and trying to figure out what these are. I think that they are, I believe they're, a lot of people say Nephilim, and I'll say that sometimes, but I think that a better word for it is Eliod, a descendant of a Nephilim. I'm not sure that we still have the pure blood Nephilims here. And the reason I say that is because when you look at animals and animal behavior, I think that if we was dealing with an animal, we would have already had one in a zoo. There would have been a containment of a creature. But I think what we're dealing with is something of a higher intelligence, something that has more attributes than what we have. Maybe they possess certain abilities from the angelic DNA that we're not sure of kind of what they are. I was a big follower of Scott Carpenter and the DNA project that they had done, the nuclear and the mitochondria, and been an investigator. It all made sense to me. When you look at it from a forensic side, it makes sense. The things that they're capable of doing. I think that they have probably been here a long time, probably longer than us. And I think that whenever we go out and look for these things, I think they know the difference between an investigator and a camper and a fisherman. And I believe that they can tell by just the type of lights we're using and equipment we're using. IR lights, infrared lights, I believe they can detect all that. But that's just my opinion.
So are these things demons? Are they?
Yeah, I do. And the reason that I would believe that is because whenever you look through all the people that have cryptid encounters, approximately 25% of those people will have a supernatural encounter. And if you were to attribute the Nephilim to the demons, the fallen angels, and then people having those supernatural encounters after having the cryptid encounter, it's made me wonder, is the flesh and blood that we're dealing with, is that the Eliods? Is that the flesh and blood? And then the demons that come along, or the spiritual aspect of it, is that because there is still that connection? They're still family. One just has a body, the other one don't. But they're still on the same mission. They're the same being. And a lot of people talk about, for instance, at my granny's house, we would have the things outside that would make the noises, that would scratch on the house, that you would hear the breathing and stuff like that. But then you would also have to where they would be asleep at night, and there's 8 kids, so there's a house full, and that they would be asleep at night, and it would sound like beans would just pour all over the kitchen floor, and you get up and run in there and there's nothing there. So there was always these paranormal activity. I mean, my uncle was in Vietnam, and he shot at what he described as, it looked like an older man wearing a white t-shirt floating across the hog pasture several times. And, it was just like nothing was happening. So I think that whenever we we investigate these things. And just my opinion, again, coming from a Christian perspective, I think that we need to put on the armor of God. And I believe that when we're working with these things and dealing with these things, that we are, by investigating them, giving them place, giving them power, and giving them a certain amount of authority to be able to interact with us. And I think we have to take control and take charge over them and give them a limit on what they're allowed to do with us, because I think that there's the possibility that they could inflict harm or something worse to you.
In my opinion, I do not believe that they are demons. I think we often saturate a lot of belief systems, put in texture to help give out that belief system, because it's something that for many people would say have form of validity to it. But I do think we have a misconception because there's not enough evidence to support it. If someone can prove to me that they are supernatural, then that will be great. Until then, to each of our own, I guess. Has there ever been an experience that has stood out to you, and one of which has made you remember, especially one of which is a cryptid experience? Could even be paranormal.
As far as the dog man, as far as a case, whenever I'd done the series, when I investigated the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders, I learned a whole lot whenever I'd done that. There was a lure that there was a shapeshifter or Gugwe that was seen on the property that the little girls were found on. During the investigation, I asked to speak to the shaman. In that area, it is still very much native, and they still practice the old ways in that area. That's still a very, very religious area as far as the natives. I'm Cherokee, and I asked to speak with them. And for me to even be able to speak with them, they had to have a meeting to determine if I was good or bad. And they eventually said that I was good medicine. Now, what really caught my attention was when I brought up Dogman to them, they laughed at me. They told me that was a white man's name for this creature. And what they start telling me is, Bigfoot and Dogman, they start telling me they're the same. And I said, how are they the same? Some look like werewolves, some kind of look like the ape, How would they be the same? So I'm sitting there questioning him, and he looks at me and he says, we have Chihuahuas, we have bulldogs that don't have snouts, German Shepherds have snouts, Rottweilers are bigger, and he starts talking about, but then he says, but they're all dogs. They all come from the same thing. He said, we used to speak to them, we used to trade with them. We know what they are. And, if you go back and you get a chance and you can read into that, I think what really will open a lot of people's eyes as far as the Gugwe and as far as evidence is the OSBI, the FBI, the local law enforcement, they all put in their reports during investigating that there was shape-shifting going on in those woods. And they were seeing things that were not normal. And yeah, it gets pretty deep.
We're talking about Dogman in the late Linda Godfrey with Beast of Bray Road, or Steve Cook with the Michigan Dogman song. What's your overall opinion on some of the more outdated, outgoing cases, such as the Land Between the Lakes massacre, for example, if you have an opinion on that, given how Oklahoma's not too far away from Kentucky?
I think on the LBL, I think definitely something went on. You have too many witnesses. You've got too many people from different walks of life that talked about it, all the way from the gas station. As far as who was there, survivors, I think that's a hard one to wrap your head around, to try to figure out without more proof. Something has went on there, and the reason I say that is because I know some people that went down there, and if you just have a Bigfoot sticker on your car, you're pretty much hounded until you leave. They don't like the area investigated, and a lot of times that is a telltale sign if you go somewhere and you're not welcomed. I think that a lot of times those things are covered up because there is too big of a liability. I would be careful I don't get your channel in trouble with if you were to admit that you knew that these creatures existed, but yet you were allowing people to go out there, then the liability would be outrageous. And then, of course, people's going to stop camping, people's going to stop walking the trails, people's going to stop going to the national parks. They're going to lose money. So it always comes to them. It's always money. And if they're going to lose money, then they're going to cover it up. I know that just from whenever I was working, just our policy was if something was to go on, it was a supernatural or somebody called in a Bigfoot or something like that. I was a captain at my last rank, and I approved all reports that went to court or whatever. And what we would do is, if you can't prove that you're dealing with something, then protocol was it was a prowler. You always go back to the prowler, which is, human, easy to cover up. You don't have to go into any of the supernatural, the Bigfoot. But I think a lot of officers are conditioned, even at the LBL, whenever that happens. I've questioned a lot of this too, and some of my questions have been, and I don't have the answers to this, it's weird to me, is how come in some of these cases to where people lose their lives, why is our game wardens or wildlife officials, why are they the ones taking over the crime scene? And the only thing I can come up with is, in most states, they're either federal or they work very close with federal.
Had there ever been a time where you had to take something aback and said that's a little too much, too extreme?
As far as to reconsider my thoughts, really most of them that I've covered have probably confirmed more of what I've thought. As far as remembering an encounter, probably one of the encounters that will always stick with me was actually a letter that was wrote to me. When my mom and them was younger, I told you that they'd had trouble at my granny's house. This guy that they had known back before I was ever thought of, he was the big guy in town, whooped everybody, the tough guy, wasn't scared of nobody. So he's like, I'll come down and I'll take care of it for you. It's just some guy window peeking, I'll take care of him. So he comes down, sits on the couch. Almost at 8:30, Mom said, is whenever it would start. And he's sitting on the couch, and 8:30 comes around, and sure enough, starts rattling the back doorknob. He jumps up off the couch, he's going to go out there and take care of it. He runs out the door. He's gone for just a little bit. And they said he walks back in the house, and he's white as a sheet, and he just falls on the couch. And they're all asking him, are you okay? What did you see? He wouldn't talk about it. He wouldn't tell nobody about that it was almost 50 years until in like 2021 or 2022, I reached out to him. And I got a hold of him, and he didn't want to talk about it then. And it was probably a month later, I had found out that he had gotten COVID and was really, really sick, and they weren't expecting him to make it. After he had passed, I received a letter from him. And in the letter, he explained to me what he had seen that night. He said he had seen something that wasn't supposed to exist. He said whenever he walked around the side of Granny's house, which you would walk out her front door and around the side of her house, she had big elm trees that they used for shade in the summer. And there was a yard light, but the yard light was out in the circle drive, so it had to shine down through all the trees. So in the back, it was really dark, but you could see where it come through the trees. And he said when he stepped around the side of the house, he said it was standing sideways. Granny would dump her scraps out the back door into a hog trough. And he said it was grabbing the food out of the hog trough and was shoving it in the side of its mouth. Not in the front of its mouth, but in the side of its mouth. And he said it had it all over it. Like it was just sloppy eating. And he said when he walked around the side of the house, it looked at him. It turned its head and it looked at him. And he said it smiled. And I don't know if when people say they're smiling, if they're smiling or if they're showing their teeth, but a lot of people say they feel they're smiling. He said it smiled. And it looked at him and it said, hello. And he said, I knew that if it wanted to do me in, it could do me in. So he said, I ran. And that will always stick with me.
So that you are boots on the ground, I wanted to ask you, how do you go about investigations? How do you go about research? What's your normal protocol?
One of the things I think is important whenever when I go out is I try to go to a secluded area where you don't have a lot of people around. And another thing that I think is important also is I do it like I would pretty much if you're surviving in the woods. You got to have food, you got to have water, you got to have shelter. And I think these creatures are pretty much the same way. I think they act the same way. I do believe that they have their routes they follow to go to people's houses for whatever reasons they go. I mean, I've had this theory because a lot of people talk about seeing them, watching them, and stuff like that. Is it because they came from the Watchers? I don't know, but but when I do go, I like to go down around water. I believe they use our creeks and our waterways as ways of travel, and I think it's convenient for them because they can drink, they can eat. Food source comes to the water all the time. I think it's just a convenience. I've heard people say that they have seen them swimming. So I don't know if they can use the water for maybe walk in the water to cover their tracks. Natives done that a lot. They would walk in the creek beds and stuff to keep from leaving tracks. So I think that's important. I think natural food sources are important. One of the places I go, I hunt and fish a lot, so I know there's a lot of hogs, wild hogs, rabbits, squirrels, and whenever you have a lot of that, you're going to have a predator, and I believe they are predators, and so I try to look for a place that if I was where I would want to go, and something that would be sustainable to me, that if I couldn't go into town, that I could still have what I needed.
When you launched your channel, Abnormal Investigations, what was the overall goal? Was it to share stories? Was it to conduct research? What was your purpose?
Actually, whenever I launched it back in it was 2021, I was actually telling my two boys stories about my grannies, and they were like, "Dad, you should tell it on YouTube. You should tell it on YouTube." And I was like, "There ain't nobody going to want to hear that." So when I started out in 2021, it was because they were pretty much at me, and my youngest son Hunter, he was like, "Dad, you got to tell him. You got to tell him. You got to tell him." And he was all into YouTube, and so I was like, "All right, we'll do a video." So I done the video in my bedroom with the TV beside me, and they're like playing games and stuff. And I just told one story, and whenever I told the story, it just went viral, and everybody was like, "Have you looked at the numbers?" And it just exploded. And then I started getting people's feedback, and I started realizing that the similarities that we went through and what other people were going through, even over in England and other places, that the what they were doing were so close together. And then you start wondering, why are they why are they doing the same things? And then it just goes back to me anyways, that shows that they are of the same creature, whatever they are. And to push the channel further, I think right now what I like doing is awareness. That would be my number one goal. If I could keep another child from being taken, that to me would be the most important. As far as a Christian, it has led me deeper into my studies, because the more you look into these, it seems like the more it just kept proving itself true and true and true. And then I get to thinking about, man, all the people every year that take their children out, that are fishing, and Dad, I'm going to run to the truck and get a Gatorade, and they let their kids run up to that truck at that wood line. It only takes a second. And in search and rescues, people don't realize it. They take the age of the missing person the abilities that person has, what kind of shape they're in, and then they make a grid. So if you have a young child, that grid may only be 3-4 miles at first, because they're going to think a child's going to be lost. He's going to walk in circles. He's going to cry. He's going to be upset. They'll go by all that. If you have something that's smarter than that, it grabs that child and it passes that barrier. I mean, you may never see your child again. So I think awareness would be the biggest thing that I like to push, even for the people that say, Bigfoot's not real, cryptids aren't real. Well, bobcats are, bears are. I mean, there's stuff out there that will target your kids just because they are smaller. So I think awareness probably.
What's your advice to those out there who are starting in cryptozoology, or for those who are enthusiasts who actually want to take it serious and go for a more deeper level of interest?
I think number one is to know what you're getting into. Yeah, it's fun, it's exciting until you have your encounter. And then people need to realize that once you have that encounter, it may not just be that night that you have that encounter. These things will follow you home. And they can follow you home flesh and blood. They can follow you home supernatural. They can cause you a lot of trouble. I know, people that had a lot of trouble. I think one of the important things, and this is just what I was taught, is whenever you're investigating something, it's hard for us as humans not to have an opinion already before the investigation's over. A lot of times we will already think that we know the answer to what has happened. And my captain, the one that taught me, told me that the best investigator is a person that follows the evidence no matter where it takes you. And it may not always take you to the truth that you're looking for. It'll take you to the truth, but not always the one you want. But you have to be open-minded enough, and you have to be able to follow the evidence no matter where it takes you to find that truth. Because if you don't, then you're only contaminating it, and you're making it into something that you want it to be, and then you're just contaminating the whole investigation. You're not doing any good. You're not doing any service.
Well, Stephen, I want to thank you so much for doing this show. A lot of the things you brought up have very good validity too. And of course, while we have a few differences of opinion on some stuff, that's totally okay, because at the end of the day, it's all about communication. It's all about presentation. And of course, respecting each other researchers' opinion and trying to find definitive answers to the topics of what we think about in our ominous, mysterious, macabre world. Before we do, of course, conclude the show tonight, I was just wondering, can you please promote your show? Tell us a little about Abnormal Investigations, where people can find you, and, of course, those out there who want to share their encounters with you, bud.
Mostly just really on my Facebook page or my YouTube page, Abnormal Investigations. What we do over there is I've investigated a few of the unknown animal attacks. Try to give an opinion based off of investigational skills. We take reports from people, excuse me, encounters. We do share those, but really what I enjoy doing over there is the boots on the ground, is being out, because I don't think we can really know what's out there unless we go and we experience it ourselves.
Stephen, what would be your advice to those out there who are starting out in research, or importantly, those who have had an encounter and go about it in such manner?
I think don't go out and take it as a game, and don't go out and take it lightly, because these things, I believe, are they're opportunists, and if you put yourself in a situation, I do believe they will take advantage of it. I've seen things that I know are not what they're supposed to be, but I've seen them called other things. There is cover-ups that happen, and if you're going to get into it, go with somebody that has knowledge of the area, somebody that knows the area, somebody that's familiar with the animals of that area, so they're going to know what is a common sound, what's not a common sound. That way, they're going to be able to alert you to something that's not right, something that's off, instead of you being out there hearing every noise, jumping at every noise. That they'll be able to tell you that's normal, that's not normal. And one of the best people I think you can find to do that is actually a lot of the coon hunters. They know them woods like the back of their hands. They run them at night all the time.